All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to California Sea Grant's informational webinar about the 2024 Graduate Research Fellowship. My name is Leon Gua. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the research coordinator for California Sea Grant. I am joined here today by two of my wonderful colleagues, Tanya Torres, who is our Marine Debris Research Associate, and Madeline Wampler, who is our program analyst. And the three of us will be guiding you through this webinar and providing any support with any tech issues that you're having as we go along. So thanks for joining, and we'll go ahead and get started. So we just want to start this webinar by noting that the information we're presenting today, which is being recorded, is accurate as of today. However, it's possible that the information about this request for proposals will change. And so we really encourage you to keep an eye to our research request for proposals webpage. That is where we will post any changes to this RFP as we go throughout the application process. And we really urge you not to download the webpage or anything like that, but really look and refer to the webpage whenever you are looking for the application components and guidance and whatever else. So Tanya just shared that in the chat, and it is a wonderful, important resource to pay attention to. The objectives of our webinar today are to provide an overview of the request for proposals. We're not going to give you every single detail because that would make for a very long and boring webinar, but we really want to highlight a few things and give you some tips for success in preparing your application. We'll review some important components and then answer any questions that you may have. We're planning to have 2 sessions for Q&A, so we'll pause kind of in the middle of the presentation and then again at the end. So feel free to use the Q&A feature that we have to put any questions that you have now, or you can wait and see if we cover them and we'll address them during those Q&A sessions. So all participants are automatically muted throughout the presentation, but you do have the option to raise your hand if you would like to verbalize a question. You can also show captions to enable transcription on your side. I already mentioned the Q&A feature, and we will have a recording of this presentation available on the California Sea Grant website for you to be able to refer to. If you do have any very specific questions that might only apply to your situation, we highly encourage you to go and email us at sgproposal@ucsd.edu. And I believe Tanya is going to share that in the chat. Thanks, Tanya. All right, so in case you are not familiar with California Sea Grant, just want to provide a high-level overview of what our program is and what we do. So our mission is to provide the information, tools, training, and relationships needed to help California conserve and sustainably prosper from our coastal and marine environments. And we do that through a number of ways. One is by providing funding for grants and fellowships, just like this one. We also have programming and communications and extension, doing essentially research and outreach with the California communities that engage in coastal resources. So we definitely encourage you to visit our website if you want to learn more. But funding fellowships is a really important part of our program. And so we're really excited to be able to offer this opportunity and to have you all be interested in it. So the goals of this fellowship are to engage highly qualified scientific talent to help advance the state of scientific knowledge, provide support for the training and development of scientists able to work in multidisciplinary, field-oriented, and/or modeling-based applied research intended to support research management, promote scientific partnerships across agencies, research institutions, and nonprofit organizations, and of course, invest in people, particularly the graduate and postgraduate fellows and alumni who will become future coastal and marine science policy and management leaders, and provide you with the knowledge and expertise to thrive now and in the future. Some of the key components of this fellowship is support for applied graduate research, centering issues relevant to California communities and projects that are likely to yield measurable impacts to the local economy, community, and environment, mentorship by a research mentor and community mentor, and having a strategy for outreach and engagement. So I'm going to go over the award information. And since there's a lot of information, I'm going to try and animate it so it's not so overwhelming. This RFA is focused on proposals that address objectives specific to the resilient communities and economies, or RCE strategic focus area that's in our strategic plan, as well as the sustainable fisheries and aquaculture strategic focus area in our strategic plan. However, we will make a note here that we're really focusing on the fisheries aspects of the SFA focus area because we actually have a concurrent request for proposals about aquaculture. And so if your research is really focused in aquaculture, you might want to take a look at that RFP with your advisor and see if that might be a place where you could apply. But if you're working in fisheries, this is definitely a RFP for you. We're anticipating funding up to 9 projects or fellowships contingent upon receipt of anticipated funds from NOAA. And the duration of these projects is typically 2 years, but we do welcome requests that are for a single year. If you're, for example, closer to the end of your research, or you might be needing to bridge between this and another funding source, 1 or 2 years is perfectly acceptable. Another important aspect of the application is the budget and how much money you can actually request for this fellowship. We're really pleased to announce that we were able to increase the upper limit for this fellowship this year. So now you can, applicants can request up to $45,000 per year. This can include funds for a stipend and research-related expenses. The amount that you request for your graduate stipend must conform to your institution's normal stipend for a half-time graduate student at their experience level. And some of these terms may not be super familiar to you. So I just have that note at the bottom that we really expect that you're working with your PIs, meaning your research mentors, and the sponsored projects office at your campus to talk through these sort of award information and budget related topics, because we don't expect that you as a grad student would necessarily know what any of these terms mean. You can, of course, request less than $45,000 a year. And if applicable, you can indicate your expected costs for expendable supplies, publication costs, and travel. For the solicitation, research projects are required to provide 25% in matching funds from non-federal sources. And again, this is something you should talk with your PI about, because they may be able to work with their institution to provide matching funds for you. And an important, relatively recent update is that if you are a CSU graduate student that meets the eligibility requirements of this RFP, we do encourage you to contact CSU Coast, because they may be able to provide matching funds for you. We now have a link on our RFP that directs you to the CSU Coast website, and I believe they just sent some emails today referring to that opportunity. So I definitely encourage you to reach out to them if you are from the CSU network. All right, so an overview of the timeline. Today we have our informational webinar, and the pre-proposals are due via EC grant on March 1st by 5 p.m. Pacific time. These deadlines are very strict. We don't allow a late proposal. We don't accept late proposals. Then there will be review of the pre-proposals. And in early May, we will be providing feedback on those proposals based on the review that was conducted. You will be given an encourage or discourage status, indicating whether we encourage you to submit a full proposal. However, it's important to note that anyone who submits a pre-proposal is eligible to submit a full proposal for this opportunity. June 21st by 5 p.m. Pacific time, the full proposals are then due via EC grants. They will be reviewed, and we expect that in September of 2023, we will be able to notify applicants of their status. And these fellowships would then begin on or after February 1st. And if it's a 2-year fellowship, it would then end 2 years later. So eligibility, applicants must be enrolled in a full-time graduate or professional degree program at a California academic institution prior to the award of the fellowship, beginning no later than fall of 2024. Master's and PhD applicants are all welcome. And we do allow for provisional acceptances, meaning if you're not actually accepted at this time into the graduate program, but the advisor there has said if you receive this fellowship, then they will accept you. That is acceptable in order for you to actually apply for this fellowship. Candidates must remain associated with an accredited California institution of higher learning during the duration of the award. And applicants must be eligible to receive federal funds because these are federal funds that we're using to fund the fellowship. So it is up to the applicant to check with their institution if they're eligible to receive federal funds, and if applicable, obtain the appropriate visa to work at their institution throughout the fellowship period. So again, something you should talk with your research mentor about and check if you potentially are unsure if you are eligible to receive federal funds. Applicants must include a research mentor, which is typically the student's academic advisor, and a community member, and we'll elaborate on what each of these roles are. So a research mentor, as I said, is typically the academic advisor. They should be scientists actively engaged in environmental science, social science, policy, or economics as the primary focus of their position, with a publication record in peer-reviewed scientific journals. They must be permitted by their institution to serve as a principal investigator on grants. They must be from the academic institution at which the fellow is enrolled, and the fellowship applicants must include a letter of commitment from the research mentor they plan to work with in the proposal stage. The community mentor or mentors, on the other hand, must be familiar with existing data and or research issues central to the proposed research. They should be individuals whose work requires the application of scientific information and findings that will result from the fellow's research project. And some examples of who can serve as community mentors include local, regional, state, and federal agencies, tribal governments, non-governmental organizations, marine and coastal industry representatives, community-based organizations, and we're highly encouraging collaborations with community mentors that represent the interests of Indigenous, disadvantaged, and underserved communities. We know that there is a really diverse pool of potential projects that could be funded from this opportunity. And so the community mentor collaboration for each project may look different from one fellowship to the next, and they really should be tailored to the goals of your particular project. We do want to note here that the apparent or demonstrated depth of proposed collaboration with the community mentor is a really important factor in the selection process. And so we encourage you to enlist the community mentor in developing your proposal as early as possible. Okay, so I am now going to take an ear break and just note that up next we have priority focus areas, pre-proposal components, full proposal components, selection criteria. So that's what we'll talk about next. If you have a question that is related to those, perhaps hold it. But if you have any questions about what we've already reviewed, clarifications, repeat something, feel free to add it into the Q&A feature and we can answer that question now.
Leon, we do have a question for you. First, we have a shout out or a thanking you for shouting out of Coast by Krista Kamer. So that's cool. And then secondly, we have a question asking if you know of students who are currently receiving federal fellowship funding for a stipend, for example, the Nancy Foster or the GRFP, is eligible to apply for funds to support research expenses beyond that current stipend.
Yes, as long as you haven't already covered those expenses in your existing fellowship, and they are allowable expenses based on the RFP. And if you're ever not sure, you can reach out to our budget contact that's in our RFP. That would be allowable. And it would be important to note that you have that current support in the current and pending support section of your proposal, which we'll get into in a little bit. But yes, you would be eligible to apply for the fellowship, I believe, based on what you described.
All right, and we have a couple more. Someone is asking if you have any advice on choosing a community mentor, and should this be someone that knows the applicant well, or can it be, you know, anyone who's close to the project?
So I would suggest you first ask your research mentor, because they probably have a really good network in place, or at least ideas of who might be good to reach out to that would be within your research field. So I would say start there. And if they don't think of someone right away, perhaps they can think of someone else that you could talk to that could connect you with a community mentor. Leveraging your network is extremely important. You will always hear that as you go out throughout your career. So I would definitely say start there. They will be able to guide you the best. But I also would say don't be afraid to send out some cold emails. If you show that you have done some research, some background of what an organization or individual has done and how it might be relevant to your project, the worst thing that they can say is no or not respond, right? But at least you tried, and it might be someone that you could connect with even beyond this particular opportunity. So I guess those are my two suggestions. Did I miss any part of that question, Tanya?
There was a question on should they be someone who knows the applicant well? And it sounds like not necessarily.
Thank you. I knew I forgot something. They do not have to be someone that knows you well. I'm guessing that since you will be working with them on developing a proposal, it's probably easier if you know them already, but that is certainly not a requirement for our fellowship applications.
And just stemming from that, we had a question on the knowledge of the community member. If they're knowledgeable about the community needs, but not necessarily science or literature, is this permitted? Maybe they're underserved and don't have access to a lot of the scientific literature and things like that. And I'm guessing that, yes, I think that's very highly encouraged and appropriate, and understanding that you want someone that's in the community who's aware of the needs. That person can be a community member or mentor.
Yes, we do want to highlight that kind of paragraph that mentions we recognize that the community mentor might differ just depending on what your project's focus is on. And so just making the case in your proposal as to how their knowledge is supporting your project and how it's critical for the outreach and education components. I think that is very reasonable to consider multiple types. And if you're ever unsure, just feel free to reach out to us and we can talk more about your specific situation and make sure it's appropriate.
So we do have 3 more questions. Do we have time for that, Leanne?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so there's a quick one here, I think. So in the chat, someone said a mentor. You said a mentor can be from a federal agency. Does that include NOAA staff?
Yes.
Great. And then there was a question on elaborating a bit more on matching funds requirement and how applicants should quantify this.
How people should quantify matching funds in the budget. I'm going to assume that's what they're talking about. So I will look up a little section about the types of things that qualify for matching funds based on NOAA Sea Grants policy. But essentially, we would need to know what matching funds are going to be promised for your particular budget. So in this case, part of the proposal is submitting a budget via EC grants, where you might indicate, for example, if your research mentor is providing their salary as match throughout the duration of the fellowship, it would be indicated in the match column of the budget. So these are the types of things that your sponsored projects office and your research mentor will be able to guide you on, because they are much more familiar with actually building these types of budgets and working with matching funds. But if you ever have questions about a specific type of match and whether that's acceptable, reach out to sgbudget@ucsc.edu and we can work with you on that. And I'll see if I can quickly find that language.
And while you're looking for that, Leon, I might be able to answer this one, but I'm going to say my answer and you can correct me if I'm wrong. There's a question asking that if a student graduates and remains affiliated with the university as a research staff or postdoc, are they still eligible for continued funding during the 2-year period, or do they need to remain a student? I think the answer is they have to be enrolled. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me go to the eligibility language just to make sure that's clear there. Yes, enrolled in a full-time graduate professional degree program, and they must be associated with that institution for the duration of the award. So I think you need to, if you are potentially going to graduate in that time, you can request less than 2 years. You could request a year of funding if you're worried about potentially graduating before the 2 years are up. Okay, Tanya, that seems like potentially a good stopping point.
We will answer the
And
remaining questions at the end of the next section.
yes, thank you. Okay, and I will try and find that the matching information later on. Okay, so here we go, onward. Thanks for all your questions, by the way. Wonderful, we appreciate them. So now we're going to talk about the priority research objectives. So first off, these primarily are coming from our 2024 to 2027 strategic plan, which is available on our website, on the RFP, and Tanya's also going to share it in the chat. So this is just language that's pulled directly from our strategic plan. So first, we welcome research projects that are within the resilient communities and economies strategic focus area. So our goals in this include California's coastal communities are better prepared for extreme and chronic weather and coastal hazards, climate change, economic disruptions, and other threats to community health and well-being with support from science partnerships and the co-production of knowledge. And goal 2 is that California's coastal communities have the information, partnerships, and tools needed to support planning, policy, and actions for emerging marine and coastal industries and resource management that ensure an equitable and resilient path forward. A mouthful, but we also have example topic areas in our strategic plan in case you would like to see a little bit more about the types of research that fall within this strategic focus area. We also welcome projects that are applicable to the fisheries part of the sustainable fisheries and aquaculture strategic focus area. And just a reminder, if you jumped on late, that we have a concurrent aquaculture RFP that you could consider applying to if you are hoping to, if you are currently have research in aquaculture and we're hoping to apply to this. So the SFA goals include that California's fisheries, aquaculture, seafood systems, and the environments that support them are environmentally, economically, and socially more sustainable and resilient to future change through the facilitation of partnerships and the co-production of knowledge. And goal 2 is that California's fishing, aquaculture, and seafood industries have evidence-based information, partnerships, and tools needed to support decision-making and a sustainable path forward through community engagement, collaboration, and education. Finally, to the extent that is possible, we encourage projects to also address our cross-cutting focus area in diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and accessibility. So the 2 goals that are applicable here are that across our staff and network, California Sea Grant builds a program where a diversity of lived experiences are represented, particularly Indigenous, underserved, and underrepresented identities in marine and coastal sciences, thereby facilitating a culture of belonging and equitable support. I'm already talking a lot. I'm starting to trip over my words. And goal 3, California Sea Grant and its network co-produce knowledge, create access to scientific information, and support research and scholarship priorities of value to a diversity of communities focused on Indigenous, underserved, and underrepresented peoples. Finally, we do want to share that the Resources Agency Sea Grant Advisory Panel, or RASCAP, is a crucial part of the review process, and thus their priorities are also relevant to this call. This is a panel that's codified in California state law, and they advise and assist our program, as well as the University of Southern California Sea Grant. So input from RASCAP is directed toward identifying and meeting priorities for funding according to the needs identified by the state resource protection and management agencies. And so they do review the research proposals and provide a resource protection and management relevant view of the proposal's value. So we do have in our RFP a compiled list of research priorities from participating member agencies. It was compiled, I believe, in 2020, so we're hoping to update that soon. But for now, that's a place where you can look to understand the types of state and management relevant priorities that the RASCAP panel has. All right, so we're finally to the application components section of the webinar. So the first step of this application process is a pre-proposal, a reviewed pre-proposal. So this pre-proposal is due March 1st at 5 p.m. Pacific time via eCgrant, which is our submission portal, and I will be showing you that a little bit later. Formatting guidelines for both the pre-proposal and full proposal stage can be found in the RFP. And the pre-proposal, we actually did modify the requirements this year to try and reduce the barriers of applying for this. So we reduced the pages and the types of requirements that we have as part of this. So the things that we would like to know from you in your pre-proposal are your name, affiliation, contact information, title of your project, funding requested, and the focus areas you will be addressing. You should then provide a project narrative, which has a 3-page maximum, excluding references. And that includes things like the project goals, objectives, background, methods, engagement strategies, potential outcomes, benefits, and broader impacts, including relating to DASIA. We ask for your curriculum vitae or CVs, and you need to provide this for at least the applicant and research mentor who should be identified, but the community mentor CV is optional only if you have already identified and confirmed your community mentor. And those should each be 2 pages at the maximum. We request the name of your research mentor, the name of your community mentors if identified. If you have not identified them, please list some potential mentors that you're interested in, just so we have a sense of the types of folks you're looking for. We have a permit statement, which essentially states whether you will require a permit for this work. We ask for 5 potential reviewers, and we also have an optional demographics questionnaire just to help us understand the suite of folks who are actually putting in applications for our opportunities. So as I mentioned, this pre-proposal is reviewed, and it will be reviewed first, at the same time by an outside panel of technical experts, and also by RASGAP, which is the panel that I mentioned earlier, and they will be looking at state management relevance in particular. Evaluation criteria for the pre-proposal stage is skewed highly toward alignment of your projects to the RFP research priorities. So that is about 50%. We also will be evaluating for technical and scientific merit, the overall qualifications of the applicant, your outreach and engagement plan, and elements of DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion. Once we receive the reviews from those 2 panels, we will then make a decision on who should be encouraged or discouraged to submit a full proposal. And those emails, including summary feedback on your pre-proposal, will be sent out in early May of 2023. So there is an opportunity to improve your pre-proposal for a full proposal. Okay, and then I just want to note that only those who submit a pre-proposal are eligible to submit a full proposal, and that regardless of whether you are encouraged or discouraged, you can submit a full proposal if you have submitted a pre-proposal. Okay, so on to the full proposal stage. So the deadline for the full proposal is June 21st at 5 p.m. Pacific time, also via eCgrant. This includes a number of different components, so I encourage your careful review of what is required for this application. Again, we have tried to examine and reduce the required components to help lower the barriers for folks to be able to apply. I'll just highlight a few important things. This signed institutional cover page, which I will show you later on, requires your sponsored project's office signature. And sometimes they will require you to submit their proposal to them and get their signature sometimes 2 weeks in advance of the actual application deadline. So definitely encourage you to get in touch with them early and let them know that you have required their signature, and they can communicate with you about their process. And it might be different for every institution. So we don't want to give too specific of guidance there. And the template for this cover page can be found in the Excel workbook that is available on the RFP. And I, again, will show you that in a minute. We ask you to provide which focus areas you're going to be addressing, a 1,000 character project summary, your project narrative, which has an 8-page maximum excluding references, a personal career statement, which is 2 pages, an outreach and engagement plan, which is 2 pages. And this should be developed with your community mentor. And we highly encourage that plan to focus on underserved and/or disadvantaged communities. Again, we ask for your CVs for the applicant, research mentor, and community mentor. And then we ask for letters of support. So these should be about 2 pages each, and you should have 1 from your research mentor, 1 from your community mentor, and then 2 additional letters of academic recommendation. Next slide. So we also do ask for copies of your graduate and undergraduate transcripts. It is perfectly acceptable for those to be unofficial transcripts, but we do ask that you redact sensitive personal information from them. The budget narrative, as I mentioned earlier, can be particularly challenging for graduate students to navigate. So we strongly encourage you to work with your research mentor, institutions, research administration, or sponsored projects office to develop your budget. And there is in the Excel workbook a way that you can kind of prepare that budget. But the final budget does need to be submitted via EC grant. There is a 2-page data management plan, an environmental compliance questionnaire, and any permits that you need or have in place for this work. We have a current and pending support section for key personnel on the project. And again, the templates in the Excel workbook. And we ask the demographic questionnaire one more time at the proposal stage. So anyone who submits a proposal will be provided access to EC grant for the full proposal stage. And that's likely will happen a few days after you submit your proposal. Okay, so the review of full proposals, all of them will be reviewed by an outside panel of technical experts, but only proposals that are deemed fundable by the technical panel are going to be reviewed by the RASGAP panel for state management relevance. The evaluation criteria are different for the full proposal stage. So we have 30% for alignment of the projects to the RP research priorities, 30% for technical or scientific merit, 5% for the overall qualifications of the applicant, 5% for project costs, 20% for outreach and engagement, and 10% for DEI. We are hoping to notify all applicants of their selection status in September of 2023, and your projects would start on or after February 1st of 2024. So, excuse me, once we actually have the reviews, then we will, from the technical panel from RASGAP, we will then select the proposals for funding. And so we do have explicit selection criteria that we will follow. We generally will select proposals in rank order based on what their review scores were. But we also might select out of rank order if we have a reason to based on the selection criteria. So those include things like availability of funding, balance or distribution of funds, targeting gaps in our strategic plan goals and objectives, addressing DEJA, an applicant's prior award performance, meaning if you have previously been funded by Sea Grant and did not follow or meet the award conditions, that might deter us from funding you in the future. As well as adequacy of information necessary for NOAA to be able to make a NEPA determination for your project. And that refers to the environmental compliance questionnaire that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so we are going to take a break from the PowerPoint and look at the Excel workbook and EC grant, just to give you a high-level overview, as I hope that will be helpful. So first, we're going to look at the Excel workbook. So in the RFA itself, just gonna pull this over. In the application components section, keep scrolling. We have a link that says a template can be found in the Excel workbook, and in a number of places we do have this Excel workbook linked. So what that actually looks like when you download it is this. So we've tried to make this as useful as possible for our applicants. We now have a full proposal checklist for you to kind of go through and make sure you have the different components for your proposal. The institutional cover page is shown here. So you get a sense of the types of things that you need to get information for, provide an overview for, and get the signature from your sponsored project's institutional representative. There is an example budget where you can start to build out things, again, with your research mentor or sponsored projects office. And then we also have templates for current and pending support and a milestones chart if it would be useful to you. All right, so now we're going to take a look at EC grants. So currently I am signed in an incognito mode, so you can see this from the perspective of an applicant. When you log into our EC grant, which the link is in our RFP, you should be able to see that we have opened this request for proposals for the 2024 Graduate Research Fellowship Program pre-proposal stage. So I'm just going to give you kind of a high-level overview of what this actually looks like from the inside in case you've never used EC grant before. I'm just going to put a fake proposal here. And now you get to see in real time how slow sometimes EC grant can be. Usually it's very good. But if you do ever have questions about EC grant, you can email us at sgproposal@ucsd.edu. Oh boy. Okay, here we go. All right, so when you open this, you should see that there are a number of forms on the left-hand side. These are areas for you to enter different pre-proposal components as required. The proposal stage will look very similar, but there's going to be probably a lot more tabs. Some important things are just that as you work through, you'll notice things that are required, that when you finish a form, you should check mark as complete, and this will help flag for the portal that you are done with that section and that it's good to submit. An important button is this Manage Collaborators button, because you will be able to add your collaborators, such as your research mentor or the sponsored projects office person who is working with you to prepare your budget. As long as they have an EC grant account with us, you will be able to search them here and add them to your proposal. So we definitely encourage you to do that. And if you have issues adding someone, you can email us and we can provide you support on getting that squared away. Okay, I don't think there's really anything else I probably want to show you right now, but just to give you kind of a sneak preview that it's important to go to EC grant early and see exactly what you need to fill out, because it will help make sure that you actually have everything ready by the time for the actual deadline. All right, so let's go back to our slideshow. That's all the content that I have for us. So let's open it back up for questions at this time, and then we'll share our contact information with you before we close out.
Great. So we do have a couple of questions. I'm sure we'll get a few more trickling in. One is a reminder from the previous Q&A session. And there were a couple more in there. I just want to point out that Madeline had gone in and answered it. She typed her answer in. So if anyone was waiting for an answer of those, please go back and look at the answer that Madeline typed in. But the remaining question here from earlier is, do prospective graduate students have opportunities to apply since they haven't received admission status yet?
Yes, so as long as you have a letter of support from your research mentor that they would accept you into the program if you receive this fellowship, then that is acceptable. But we have to have that commitment from your research mentor at the institution. And then before you actually start your fellowship, we would need to confirm that you actually did get accepted into that institution. So yes, you would be eligible to apply.
All right, the next one is, if someone wanted to start their research before February of 2024, can they still apply?
So if you want to start your graduate research not funded by our program before 2024, that is completely acceptable. However, our federal funding for your project will not start until February 1st. So if you have, I guess I'll stop there. And if you need me to elaborate more on that, please let me know. I hope that was clear. Does that make sense, Tanya?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the last one we have in here right now is, can you elaborate a little more on the 5 reviewers in the pre-proposal?
Sure. So essentially, we're asking for your input on reviewers, potential reviewers, so that we can collect a panel of external experts who are going to be relevant for the suite, the diversity of research that's going to be proposed at the pre-proposal stage. So it really helps us if you know of people who don't have a conflict of interest with you, that have the right expertise to evaluate your research, because it just helps us make sure that we do have a good suite of folks represented. There's no guarantee that the 5 people that you recommend, 5 or more, would actually be selected for the review panel, but it helps us get an idea of who is most appropriate. So I encourage you to think carefully about who those recommendations are, because it will increase the chance, I think, that we would have the right expertise on our panel.
Great, thank you. We just got another question in. Does the 25% match from non-federal sources need to be secured at the time of application?
So I would say that, I want to make sure I don't get in trouble. When you submit your full proposal that has a budget promising 25% match to your requested budget, that needs to be in place and secured at the time of your submission. We would assume that if your project was selected, that we would then legally, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but we would basically have claim on that 25%. So it is important that it is a real 25% match that is included in your budget. And so again, something that you should definitely talk about with your research mentor about how to have that in place at certainly by the full proposal stage, if you don't have it at the proposal stage.
Leon, I phoned a friend, and Shauna messaged us and said that the campus needs to sign off on match during the full proposal stage. So you had it correct.
Thank you. Thanks, Shauna. And I did find the language about the types of match that are acceptable. So I'm going to paste that into, will this go to everyone? Yes. Okay.
Excellent.
The formatting is a little weird, but I'm just going to elaborate, verbalize it so everyone can hear it. But the match may be in the form of selected in-kind services, unrecovered indirect or additional funds from a specified institution, agency, industry, or non-federal program. No funds from federal entities can be used as match. In-kind contributions means the value of non-cash contributions, such as property and services that benefit a federal assisted program and are contributed by non-federal third parties without charge to a non-federal entity under a federal award. So again, language that probably does not make a lot of sense to you, but your sponsored projects office will know what it means.
Yeah, there is a question asking for you to go back over the pre-proposal requirement slide. And I will plug here that you can find that information on the RFP webpage that I've linked many times in this chat, but I can link it one more time. But Leon, maybe if you'd like to briefly go over it again. That is our last question thus far. So. Oh, spoke too soon.
Okay, I think that the question's worded. Can you go back to this slide? Tyler, if you have anything in particular you want me to address, or if you're just hoping to screenshot it, we will have this recorded in a PDF of the slides. Oh, can you elaborate on the permit statement? Thank you for elaborating on your question. So as Tanya said, this is a little more detailed in the RFP, but essentially if you're expecting that any federal or state permits are required to do your work, for example, you might be collecting organisms or installing something out in the field. If it requires permits from the state of California or a federal entity at the pre-proposal stage, we're just asking that you state that a permit will be required. And before any of your research can actually commence, if you are selected to be a fellow, you would need to obtain those permits before you can actually use any of our federal funding. It's very important legal wise that we have permits in place for any of our federal funded research. I hope that helps, Tyler.
And lastly, there is a question about the overlap between this funding call and the aquaculture call. And she's asking is if this idea also will apply for the DDT call, or if that's allowed here.
So just to clarify my statement earlier, we are expecting not to have any overlap between this graduate fellowship proposal or graduate research fellowship and the aquaculture. That's in fact why we have said we will not be accepting aquaculture-based proposals to this particular opportunity, because we'd like to direct people who have that research focus to the aquaculture call. So we're trying to avoid overlap. And as far as the relevant,
sorry, Nazis, I think she meant because of that. Are you also doing the same for DDT? Like if this applicant had a DDT project, would you recommend she go to the DDT call instead?
If I guess I just direct you definitely to look at the funding priorities for each of these calls. We certainly would not encourage you to submit a proposal that is for the same exact project for each of these. But if you do have different projects, proposals that would be applicable within the funding priorities for this call, and then something that's applicable for the other call but does not overlap in the funding request, I think that is reasonable that you would apply to both of them. And Shauna, since Shauna is here, Shauna can definitely correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe that that's permissible. And feel free to reach out to us if you want to go, if you need a little more detail or conversation on that.
Right, and then Evan, who asked that question, I apologize for calling you as she just slipped out. And then there's another question here. She wants, I am really liking women today. They would like to ask and double check if the fellowship is eligible for non-US citizens.
So the language in our eligibility section that's relevant for this is that applicants must be eligible to receive federal funds. And so you would need to check with your institution as to whether you as a non-US citizen would be eligible to receive federal funds and what visa requirements, if any, you might need to pursue. So we don't prescribe this because it really depends on your institution and their protocols or restrictions. So please reach out to them and check if you as a non-US citizen would be eligible.
All right, and then another question just came in about, does your community mentor have to be geographically local to the applicant, or is there any sort of limitation on who the community member can be? If they're in the state, is that okay? West Coast, is that okay? As long as they are knowledgeable on the subject or...
Yeah, I mean, so we're encouraging projects so the eligibility is, at California-based institutions for the applicant and their research mentor. And so that I might have to get back to you on that. I think probably as long as they're able to speak reasonably, justifiably to the research that you're proposing, if they're not necessarily based in California, it might be okay. But I would like to review. Oh, okay. More specifically, what is SoCal and Bay Area collaboration be appropriate? Completely, yes. I thought you were alluding to outside of California. And again, Shauna might be able to speak to that off the cuff, but I would like to review the RFP before answering. Thanks, Evan.
Well, we don't have any more questions right now. But we do still have some time, so if you have any questions, please send them in. We're here for the next 8 minutes.
Well, thanks everyone for your great questions. I will hang on just a minute longer if in case any other ones come in, but Tanya, if you don't mind sharing our contact information in the chat, we're definitely available if you do have any follow-up questions or more specific questions. We're happy to answer those, and just thank you for your attendance today.